we're really thrilled that the film is getting a theatrical release in Germany and the rest of the world's seen it. So now it's Germany's turn.
Dad hatte mal gesagt, die Kindheit ist wie betrunken zu sein. Alle erinnern sich daran, was du gemacht hast, nur du selbst nicht.
Let's come to my first question. It's about your main character, Grace Puddle. In Germany, we often see films focused on middle or upper class families and their fairly privileged problems. But Grace is someone who truly struggles with her inner world, with external setbacks, and I would say a trauma. Why is it so important to you to tell stories about people who are often overlooked by cinema?
Well, yes, I think, so many films are about the hero and I really like making films that are about ordinary people who in many ways are having lives that are quite extraordinary and unusual. But I try and make the characters very empathetic, very relatable. Grace is a misfit. I mean, all the characters in all my films are perceived as underdogs or the other. And I really am much more interested in telling stories that are character driven and less obsessed with plot and certainly not interested in fantasy. My characters are grounded in reality, and I try and make them very believable and relatable.
One might assume that the tragic fate of the sweet little Pinky, as we can call it that way because it's normal progress of life, would send young Grace into yet another spiral of depression. But strangely enough, it seems to have the opposite effect. Since you've explored a lot of psychological themes in your work, how do you explain this emotional reaction?
Yeah, well, look, Pinky, I wanted to be a character that we all aspire to be, and I wanted her to be the opposite of Grace. She's an extrovert. She's very flamboyant. She has no sense of embarrassment. She has no fear, and she is the character that Grace wants her to become. But also, I want the audience to want to be Pinky, and she's based on a lot of people in my life who are like that, who are eccentric, colorful, but also at the same time tend to have had quite traumatic backgrounds and childhoods and backstories. And that's why I reveal to the audience what really Pinky went through as a child that created this sort of flamboyance. So I try and create characters that are very dimensional and well-rounded, that aren't just cartoonish. I mean, even though my films are animated, I certainly don't want them to be one-dimensional and cartoonish. I want these characters to be very real and, as I said, relatable.
And it works. And yeah, in preparation for the film, you explored the psychology behind why people hoard or collect in person of Grace. What was the most surprising insight you came across, and why is it a typical human thing?
Yeah, I became very curious when my father died. He was a bit of a hoarder, and I wanted to really understand the psychology. Why do we collect things? Why do we fill our homes with things we never use or never don't need? And when does collecting become hoarding? And it really is when shame kicks in. Extreme hoarders tend to be very embarrassed about their hoards. And usually extreme hoarders too have had a lot of loss or trauma in their lives. And what I discovered was that a lot of extreme hoarders have lost a child, a sibling, or a twin, and that they hoard as a way of coping with this loss in their lives. And they try and fill up that void and emptiness with things, with stuff, and they attach a lot of emotion to sentimentality to everything that they collect. So yeah, it was a really amazing period of research I did, and I learned a lot about myself as well, and why I've over my life gone through periods of cramming my home with things I don't need.
What do you collect personally, and do you know why?
Well, I used to. I got rid of it, but I started going to a lot of secondhand stores and finding old taxidermy. So I had chickens and ducks and birds and an antelope, and I had filled my home with all these stuffed animals. But I sold them all. I never, there's a lot of controversy with taxidermy. A lot of hunters go, but none of these animals I got stuffed myself. They were pre-existing and taxidermy that was all a bit rough around the edges, and some of the animals had eyeballs that were missing, and so it was bad taxidermy. That's what I was really obsessed by.
And let's talk about dubbing. Of course, it takes an important role in the film. You once said that Sarah Snook captures the melancholy of a lonely woman with hoarding tendencies. That's such a precise and poetic description, but also a bit cheeky. Is that still a compliment?
Yeah, look, Sarah was wonderful to work with because she really knew what I wanted, and that was to create a character that was funny, and at times we're laughing at Grace, but at times we really relate to her and not pity her, but really empathize and what Grace goes through is what a lot of us go through, which is loneliness, confusion, trauma, loss. She's a very universal character. And Sarah, yeah, really understood that. And very early on, Sarah and I sort of worked out what sort of tone we wanted, and we realized that it was all about intimacy, because fundamentally the film is about Grace talking to a snail for an hour and a half. So we wanted it to be very intimate, and we actually brought in one of the snail puppets for Sarah to talk to while we recorded her voice, and it became very believable and very intimate and really quite tragic and melancholic at times. And she's an incredible actor, and she just is able to bring out that emotion and get the audience to really believe that this is all true and actually happened.
And dubbing is a big thing in Germany. I'm currently working very intensively on this topic, especially as we now have the first AI dubbing studio in Germany. You can probably guess what the question is about. Can you imagine working with AI or special AI dubbing in future productions?
Well, look, I certainly, like a lot of artists, am wary of AI. I think it's a wonderful tool and is a great, is already proving its benefit in medicine and other industries. I do worry though that it might replace a lot of artists and is already replacing a lot of illustrators, graphic designers. But I think stop motion is safe for the moment because we really go to a lot of effort to make sure the audience know that what they're looking at, every prop, every set, every character has been handmade by a human being. And there's no AI, there's no CGI. I mean, the fire is yellow cellophane, the smoke is cotton wool, the tears are actually sexual lubricants, what we use for the tears. So everything is real, everything is tangible, tactile, there's no AI. And I think at the moment, audiences are really appreciating art forms that are handmade. It's why books are still popular, knitting, bread making, all these art forms, artisans, crafts that are done by hand are really, I think, going through a bit of a huge popularity at the moment because we all know that AI is here, it's not going away, and who knows what the future holds.
And like it looks all everything so great, but maybe AI could become a kind of cultural blessing too by automating tasks and freeing up time for people. It's more time for them to engage more deeply with art or even create their own stop motion stories, I think.
Absolutely. I love that meme that went viral a few months ago that said, I don't want AI doing my writing my poems and I want AI doing my laundry and my cooking so that I am free to be an artist." And I think that's really what it's about, is AI as a tool to free up time to do much more pleasurable things. Wouldn't it be great if we all only had to work 2 or 3 days a week and could spend the rest of our time pursuing our hobbies and pleasures? But I think the pessimist in me sees that AI probably is going to destroy a lot of people's careers, and I think is already doing that in many ways. So it's a worry, but I think my art form is safe for the moment.
Hopefully, yes. And coming back to your movie and your work, this has now been your seventh film. Quentin Tarantino famously limits himself to 10 films. You've planned nine, a so called trilogy of trilogies. What's your own motivation behind this decision?
Well, 30 years ago, when I was at film school, I came up with this stupid idea of making three short shorts, three long shorts, and three features, never knowing whether it would happen. But as you say, I've done seven of the nine, so I've only got two left, and then I can die. And I didn't know that Quentin Tarantino had the same idea as me until a few years ago. But I love setting goals myself, and I never take any of this too seriously. I make one film at a time, and the success of the last one really informs whether I'm going to make another one or not. So luckily, Memoir of a Snail has been popular, with the Oscar nomination and all the other awards. It means that I'll be allowed to make another one. I've just started writing the new feature script, and so I've already started that journey. Hopefully, it won't take as long as the last one, but hopefully 2029 is when we're hoping the next one will be finished.
That sounds great. You created over 200 figures, 200 sets, and thousands of props for this movie here, all handmade. Was there ever a moment where you thought, maybe 190 would have been enough?
Well, there's certainly days I wished I'd written a film about a minimalist, not a hoarder. Yeah, it was a huge challenge, and luckily my team of sculptors and artists, spent many, many months building all these things. I didn't make any of it; I just watched. But I have a wonderful team, a huge, team of very experienced artists who did all this for me, and of course the animators who spent each day roughly doing 5 to 10 seconds each of footage, a very slow process. But yeah, I think good things take time, as my mother always says.
Yeah, that's right. It's part of my next question because stop motion is such a labor intensive, tactile, and time consuming art form. In many ways, it's anti capitalist. How can we protect it in the long run in a capitalist world and inspire new generations to keep it alive?
Well, luckily, big name directors like Guillermo del Toro, Wes Anderson, Tim Burton, of course, Nick Park, and the team behind Wallace and Gromit at Aardman. They're all making features as well. And really having those big names make stop motion features makes my life a lot easier. And I think stop motion's alive and well and has never been as popular as it is now because there is so much computer generated imagery. There's even more AI imagery on the way. So I think it's really refreshing to see films that are handcrafted, that that these puppets are real, and there's that appreciation for that handcrafted nature. Of course, it all comes down to it, the story, though. I mean, it really, for me, the script is the most important thing, not the animation. It's all about a good story well told. So you can have the most beautiful animation in the world, but if you have a crappy story, then it's all a waste of time. So for me, writing is really where it all begins and is the most important part of the whole process.
And has the way you work changed over time? And were there any new tools, materials, or workflows that you used for Memoir of a Snail that you hadn't used before?
Yeah, look, the cameras have certainly gotten better. We use digital cameras now. We don't use celluloid or film anymore, but not really. The clay's the same. There's a few new types of plasticine that have come out. We had a wonderful laser cutter, which was a wonderful device for cutting up materials and for the sets. But no, look, it's all pretty much the same as it was, and we really want to celebrate that. We certainly edit the film digitally. The music's all done and cut on a computer, but it's embracing the new technologies, but celebrating the traditional techniques as well. As I said, the fire is real yellow cellophane, the cotton wool is the smoke, everything is real. And we could do, some of the special effects digitally, but again, we try and do things the traditional way, the way they were done decades ago.
And the film is incredibly emotional. I found myself crying more than once, laughing as well. But as someone who writes, directs, designs, and shapes so much of the process, when do you know that a scene really works?
Well, look, you never really know until you have a live audience. And for us, it was in France at the Annecy Animation Festival where we premiered the film. And we'd had a test audience, but that was very small. And so it was only when we had 1,000 people in this cinema laughing and crying and then giving us a standing ovation at the end that we were able to breathe a sigh of relief, that the 8 years that we'd spent making the film was worth it. So it was a very nerve-wracking moment, but it was a huge sense of relief when it was over, and huge risk. You never know until it's on the big screen, and then when it is on the big screen, it's too late. You can't go back and change it. It's locked in. So we're very lucky that it went well.
And my last question, because time is nearly over. We know very little about your next film. You said it before, only that you are already working on it. Can you share anything at all? A theme, an emotion, maybe even just a working title also?
Yeah, well, look, I can tell you it's a road film because I think I've made enough films about characters set in the out, trapped in their bedrooms in suburbia. So Australia, of course, is a very big country, and I think, road films work very well because it's such a diverse country. It's so eccentric, it's exotic, and I think a lot of your audience has probably seen Priscilla, Queen of the Desert. Well, this will be a plasticine version, but there'll be no drag queens. It'll be a different set of lead characters.
Thank you very much. It was really great. I loved your movie so much, and yeah, hopefully the German audience too.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it's great that it's finally coming to the big screen in Germany, and particularly the music. We love getting audiences to hear the music in surround sound in the dark. It's a much better film on the big screen in a cinema.
Schnecken gehen nie auf ihren Spuren zurück. Befreie dich!